I couldn't be more excited for this talk this evening with Madeline Murphy Rabb. I think we're just in for a special treat. I'm such a huge fan, and I've been looking forward to sharing this time with her. Madeline's bio is nothing short of amazing. She has been actively participating in the art world for more than 50 years as a painter, a printmaker, arts administrator, jewelry designer, art appraiser, collector, curatorial activist, and writer. In 1992, she created Murphy Rabb Incorporated, a business focused on advising collectors about building African-American art collections for their offices and homes. Madeline earned a Bachelor of Arts Degree in painting from Maryland Institute of College of Art in 1966, and a Master of Science degree in printmaking from the Illinois Institute of Technology in 1975. Madeline is the great niece of Laura Wheeler Waring, renowned portrait painter. Since her teenage years, she's been an avid collector of works created by Black American artists. Over the years, she's opened her home for private tours of her collection to the likes of the Art Institute, the Museum of Contemporary Art, the Southside Community Art Center, and the Art Expo. She's lent her work from her collection to exhibits, such as the Minneapolis Institute of Art, the Wadsworth Atheneum, the Studio Museum in Harlem, the Baltimore Museum of Art, Camden Art Center, the Newark Museum of Art, the Museum of Contemporary Art, the Los Angeles Museum. I literally could go on and on about the places that have wanted a piece of Madeline's art to be displayed. In 1983, after a career as a painter and printmaker, Madeline was appointed by Mayor Harold Washington, the executive director of the Chicago Office of Fine Arts, Department of Cultural Affairs, where she served under Mayors Eugene Sawyer and Richard M. Daley until 1991. Her offices were in the historic Chicago Cultural Center, where her 32-person staff produced hundreds of free music, dance and theater events, films, lectures, and art exhibitions. She oversaw the public arts program and awarded CityArts grants to artists and art organizations throughout the city. Madeline has given keynote speeches. To name just a few, is Spelman College, the New Orleans Museum of Art, the Jamaica Art Center, the David Driscoll Center at the University of Maryland, the Art Institute. Again, so many. In 1992, she testified before the United States Senate to advocate for the reauthorization of the National Endowment for the Arts. She has served on numerous local, state, and national panels and symposia, and was instrumental in creating the Arts Midwest Minority Fellowship Program. Her corporate clients, again, are vast: Ariel Capital Management, Brown Capital Management, Channing Capital Management, Northern Trust, Evanston Hospital, Northwestern Hospital, Mercy Hospital, the MacArthur Foundation, Draper and Kramer, Chicago Park District, the University of Chicago, to name, again, just a few. In 2004, Madeline conceptualized and implemented the art program for the 1.2 million square foot, 8-story John H. Stroger Jr. Hospital of Cook County. The collection includes original photography, mixed media, wall sculpture, quilts, painting, mosaic mural, a site-specific sculpture, and more than 800 prints. Madeline,
I'm tired.
She's amazing. So that's why, to name a few, she has just been an amazing arts professional. She served on the boards of the Art Midwest, the Joseph Jefferson Committee, the Hyde Park Arts Center, the Southside Community Arts Center, the DeSable Museum, the Alumni Board of the Maryland Institute For 21 years, she served on the board of Columbia College, and for more than 30 years, she has served on the Women's Board of the Art Institute of Chicago. Whew. Welcome, Madeline. Yay!
Thank you, Monique, and thank you for the lovely introduction. I can't tell you how pleased I am to be having a conversation with you tonight. And I am. Thank all these people who are joining. I'm so excited. Thank you.
Well, you know what? We put the call out, and you were a little concerned, and it's like, are you kidding? Everybody knows you, they love you. And this is just I was thrilled. So I got to tell you, this picture obviously is Dr. Margaret Burroughs.
Yes.
And could you tell us a little bit about when you two first met?
Well, I came to Chicago. I married in 1966 and moved to Chicago right after I graduated from college. And my uncle, George B. Murphy, said, you need to meet Margaret Burroughs.
Yes.
And you know, Margaret Burroughs did not suffer fools lightly. And she wasn't too excited about bourgeois Negroes. And so I had to prove myself to her, and we developed a long and wonderful friendship for as long as she lived, and I've been in Chicago. So she was a friend and a mentor. And I think she covered my back when I was in the Department of Cultural Affairs.
I knew you had this great history. To learn about the connection and the relationship you had with Dr. Burroughs, and the fact that you had sat on the Southside Community Arts Center's board and been such a great supporter was just even more exciting. I got to tell you just a quick story. You may not remember when we met, or do you?
I'm old. Tell me.
So we were at an event for Columbia College. I was in another life, and we were over
the photography show, right?
Yes, we were at a photography show, and it was the Gouchard Gallery when it was on, I think it was right off of King Drive. Yes. Mm-hmm. And I saw you, and you had this amazing piece of jewelry on, and I thought, oh my God, that is breathtaking. It was sterling silver and this gorgeous cherry amber. So I went over and I introduced myself, and we started chatting, and I just said, I just love that jewelry. And you said, you like this? I said, okay, who designed it? I just was trying to figure out how can I get one. And you said, well, very nicely. I did it. And it's like, of course, that I became a fan because I'm a jewelry lover. And it just was like, this woman is uber talented. So
thank you.
I went on to buy several other pieces, and I've gifted several pieces, and everyone who I've gifted them to still says they wear them with joy and pride. So that's just only one small portion. So we've got a lot of photos, which I'm super excited about, because they kind of tell a story of your life and your journey. Tell us what this picture is.
Well, this is a picture of me in my studio, my first studio, which is at 1006 South Michigan Avenue. And that was in the 70s. I had my studio from the late 70s until through the time that I had my job with the Department of Cultural Affairs.
So let's see the next one. Oh, wow.
Now,
is this in the studio?
It's in my studio. That's my painting on the left. And this is Phyllis Thompson, a wonderful printmaker and artist, and Robert Dilworth. Both of them are college professors now. Neither live in Chicago. But the three of us did an exhibit together, and we traveled it. We just had a wonderful time. And it was a time when it was very difficult for African-American artists to have opportunities and venues to exhibit their work. So we created our own opportunities. We were very entrepreneurial and aggressive.
So the reality is a lot of the arts community owe a great deal of appreciation to you and your fellow artists for paving the way. People didn't understand just how hard it was back then. Dr. Burroughs understood, and you understood just how hard it was.
Well, the Southside Community Arts Center was my safe haven. And it was the place where I did some of my first exhibits, where I taught classes. I mean, it was my home away from home, and I used to drag my sons there. So the Southside Community Arts Center has a very, very special place in my heart.
Well, we're glad that you are joining us this evening and helping us celebrate you. Tell us about, can we go back to that picture? Because I did want to ask, yeah, this one. Tell us a little bit about these pieces.
The one in the middle was a woman who was relaxing on a bench. We were in an airport, and I just loved her body language, and she had on this bright red dress. And then the other ones are kind of signifying pieces.
Okay, tell us about that.
The one on the left is called Hussy.
Okay.
And so this woman has strolled into a room, and the woman on the right is a little distressed because I think that's her husband looking at the woman coming in the room.
Okay, okay.
And then,
I'm going to ask, you did this when?
in the 70s.
Okay.
Most of these prints were done during the time that I was in graduate school and right after.
Okay, okay.
And the one on the right is called Society Ladies. So this is more like an Art Institute of Chicago event.
Okay, okay. That's phenomenal.
Social commentary.
I love it. I think that's what people want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see the next piece, photo that we have.
Now, this is a piece that I did in the Barbados. I got a free airline ticket to Eastern Airlines, and I convinced, no, I didn't convince him. I actually told my husband I was going to use that ticket to go paint at a friend's place in Barbados. And so this is all about the shadows, the flowers. The dark portion is the shadows of the upper portion. So it's an acrylic painting.
This is beautiful. The next piece?
The next piece is me with that drawing, actually, that was exhibited at George Nanamdi. He had a gallery in Detroit, and it was called Jazzonia. And I exhibited my a series of landscape figures as landscape back in 1980. And I exhibited with a wonderful artist, Amos, a New York artist who died recently.
Mm.
And it's one of those things where, you know, she continued on, and I often wonder, what would my life be if I had still hung in there? But I think I had a calling, you know.
I think when we go through even a portion of what you've done, I think you've had a pretty great, amazing journey. In fact, I'm going to ask this question. Your journey has been so incredible. What has influenced you in your career?
Well, usually I was thinking about it because I'm writing a memoir now, and so I'm reliving some of the stuff that we're talking about. I tended to change careers when I got mad as hell. And, you know, like when I was in my studio, I loved being an artist, but the times were difficult. And here I was, sort of an upper middle class Black woman married to a physician, making art about society ladies and hussies and landscapes and flowers. At the same time, there were revolutionary artists making angry paintings, and Afro-Cobra artists, and a lot of male artists. And then in the white community, there were a lot of women artists painting female portions of the body, and, you know, and I just didn't fit. And it just enraged me at times. And so I said, you know what? I don't know if I can do this, because I just didn't feel that there were enough opportunities for Black women artists at that time. Okay.
Tell us,
and that's
when you think about that, I was going to just ask you a question off of that, because when I talk to female artists now, they still feel as though there is a an imbalance
There is.
and in the arts world between the males and the females. And what would be your take on that some years later?
Well, I think it still exists, and I think we've seen a revolution in the African-American art market, the desire to acquire it across the board. And but what we're seeing is they're mostly Black men who are getting recognition. And so I think the next wave, if you want insider information, is the older Black women artists who have been undervalued and underappreciated. And I think that's going to be the next wave where the prices will reflect what they're worth, but probably not equal to what men get paid.
That would still be amazing that they would get the recognition for the works that they've, been doing for all of these years. Is this your work, a self-portrait here?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
I love it.
Thank you.
And tell us about this facial gesture here.
I don't know. It may have been one of those days where I didn't have anything else to paint. So sometimes you do self-portraits and you think, oh, what the heck? Because I think I did that in my studio.
Okay. So let's go to the next. We'll stop here for a second.
The man who changed my life. I'm telling you.
He changed Chicago. So that's amazing. He did change Chicago.
He did.
So tell us about just how you got connected to Mayor Harold Washington.
Well, I come from Baltimore, and I come from a family of political, crazy activists, both my mother and father.
Okay.
And they believed in the power of politics, the power of the vote. My son followed in my parents' footsteps, Christopher, who's now a state rep in Philadelphia.
Awesome.
And so I have this need to be part of the political arena. And so when Harold Washington was touted as a potential candidate, and then he became, he won the primary, before he won the primary rather, I decided I wanted to support him. And there were not a lot of not a lot, but not in huge numbers supporting Harold Washington at that time. They didn't know who he was. Many of them were invested in the previous administration. And so when I decided to do a fundraiser for him, I couldn't get him to be a part of the committee except for one person, Beverly Robinson. And the two of us did a fundraiser for Harold Washington because we believed in him and we believed in the potential. And there were a lot of Black people who came out and met him for the first time and became supporters. And so it was significant to have done it before the primary. But I didn't do it because I wanted anything. I did it because that was what I was taught to do. And so months later, when he was putting together his cabinet, prior to that, prior to any of this, I had told my friends, I want a real job. I'm tired of being in the studio. This place is making me nuts. Because I am sort of a gregarious person.
Yes.
And so somebody remembered that and mentioned my name to people who were looking to replace some of the prior prior administration employees. And so I was invited to submit my resume. And I didn't think I had a chance in hell. And months passed, and I was like, hey, I'm just gonna go paint, continue with my life. And one day I got a phone call from the mayor's office. And so I went in to see him with his his assistant, who knew my sister from working with her in Washington. So there was some relationship that we had there. And so he says, Mrs. Rabb, I barely sat down. When can you start? And I'm like, okay. When's the interview?
Oh, wow.
Well, obviously he'd done his due diligence, But the one thing that he said was, but I know you have to go home and ask your husband.
Uh-oh.
Man, I said, I can start next week.
There's your family.
Yes, my proud family. That's Maurice on the left. That's baby me, Harold Washington, my mama, who was my biggest advocate.
Awesome.
My sweet husband who put up with all my stuff for 39 years. He never knew what I was going to do. And Christopher.
That is so awesome. This is a beautiful picture. You know, when you talk about Harold Washington, I remember I had the benefit of being around. There was an energy that changed in the city when, you know, it was almost like it was unheard of that we would in Chicago have a Black mayor. It was just unthinkable.
Unbelievable. And I helped, I was part of Artists for Washington early on, and then I served on a committee where we helped to draft what we wanted his platform to be in the arts. Among them was to create a Department of Cultural Affairs. And
you did?
Yes, but when I was appointed, I predated the creation of the Department of Cultural Affairs. My division was subsumed under that.
Okay. So I just read your bio and all the things that you did. Tell us about that time. How did that change the city in terms of art? Because the city was not the cultural mecca of art before that.
Well, one of the things that was interesting is that all of the major cultural institutions like the Symphony, the Art Institute, the Aquarium, all of those, they got line items in the state budget. They did not have to apply. They did not have any requirements about their hiring or any of those kinds of things. And so we changed that. We had several levels, several categories of grants making. From the largest institutions, they were in a category, the mid-size and the small. And, but my legacy, I think, with the grants program is that, I'll tell you this story. Carol Mosley Braun was state rep. And when I got appointed, she says, you know, Madeline, my people are not real happy about what your office does. People in my neighborhood don't get grants. And they have felt that they have not been treated fairly, you know. And so what can I do to help you? And I said, I need more money. And so about 6 months later, I get this call from my deputy. She's at the State Arts Council hearing budget, where they're telling what the budget is. There is a line item for $250,000 for the Chicago Office of Fine Arts. And the commissioner was there and he was outraged because we had been proponents of no line items. And here was one that practically had my name on it. And so I had the freedom to do whatever I wanted to do with it. And we brainstormed. I took my grant staff out and I said, okay, what do we want? And individual artist grants, which was unheard of. Nobody gave artist grants. Unrestricted, we wanted them. And so we created that for artists who could get small grants, probably up to about $1,500. And I wanted a simple application.
Yes.
And then we did also use some of the money for small community-based arts organizations. So that I'm particularly proud of.
That left a legacy because certainly the arts are often the first to get cut. I mean, we see that today and that, you know, many of our high schools no longer have arts and music programs, unfortunately. And we've got to get back to appreciating that in our school systems and across our city. So tell me, what influenced you to start an art advisory practice?
Because I was mad as hell, always mad.
Okay.
I had been 8 years in city government, and you know, I had the moniker Ms. Culturally Diversity, and it was not always used affectionately.
Okay.
But one of the things I taught my staff was the importance of thinking about diversity before you begin anything, because that's always an issue. And I had required them to do this matrix where they looked at neighborhoods, gender, race, ward, because the government funded us and the aldermen really cared. And one of the things I did early on was invite the aldermen to events constantly. We wore them out because we wanted them to know what we did.
Excellent.
So when it was budget time, they said, oh yeah, we know Rabb is taking care of us, so.
Tell us about this photo. This has got Gwendolyn Brooks and
Studs Terkel.
Yes.
And this is, I used to have events on Daley Plaza. So this was a public program there, yeah. And it was always fun if I could get the mayor to attend, because, he was doing other hard stuff, airports and housing and, the arts, but I caused so much hell that he paid attention to what we were doing. There were some controversies that I inherited. And so he paid attention to what was going on there.
The spirit of Madeline, I love it. Creating next generations of artists. So if you had to say about your time working with Harold, you said it changed you.
It did. It made me realize that government, that artists need to realize that getting their first seal of approval from a state government, and a grant, can propel them. Because you may not get it the first go round, but you keep trying. And the thing that you learn is these panelists pay attention. Oh yeah, I've seen his work. Yeah, it doesn't look so good. Oh, but look, it's improved, and so your name gets circulated in ways that you don't even know. And one of the things though that I had to do was I really changed the whole panel process, because when I came in, most of the people who decided who got art were white, and they were in the art, entrenched in the art world, in the art community. And they didn't know the work of artists in other parts of the city. And so I invited, an artist who complained to me. I said, well, you need to be a panelist. Marva Jolly was a panelist for years, and she did a wonderful job. And then I invited school teachers, and I invited, people who would be living with what happened in their community. I love this picture. This picture was an event that I held in my home with the young at the time, Betty Saar. And on the right is Eric McKissick, and in the back is Marty Nesbitt, and in the blue is Anita Nesbitt, and in the back is where's my sheet? Mercedes Lang, the late Mercedes Lang. And all of them became collectors of Betty Saar's work way before Betty Saar became a major artist, a major highly recognized artist. And this young woman was a resident, and she was debating about buying a little collage, and she finally said, Madeline, I'm going to do it. It's going to be my entire salary.
Oh, wow.
And she bought it, and this was back in 1991, and I looked at something similar at auction, and it had increased in value 200%.
That is amazing.
Yeah, but I did these events in my home because I shared my collection with them, with future collectors, and I also brought artists into my home to talk about and sell their work. So Betty was selling work in my living room.
I love it. I love it. So
and there's no fine Oliver Jackson on the left. What can I say?
Okay, so we have to love that comment. We've got to love that comment.
Well, the thing about my work is I got to know a lot of artists, and I developed friendships with them, and then I had to have some distance with them because, some artists who didn't have representation didn't really know how to price their work, you know, and
Yes.
sometimes it was ridiculously priced. And I had to say, you know, I would love to put you in the collection, but I'm not gonna pay that for the work. And I said, and when it comes time for them to appraise the work and it appraises at a much lower price, my collector's gonna be pretty angry at me.
Yeah.
So, and then
Tell me a little bit about the photo on the right, and then you just brought up something that is my next thought, and that was, we'll talk more about the collecting, but let's talk about the picture on the right.
Both of these pictures were taken in Oakland, California, when I took a trip out there to work with collectors who my son had introduced me to on the left. And the artist is Mildred Howard, who is a mature artist who does these very powerful assemblage pieces, much like Betty Saar. She is in the same age group. Betty got recognition. Mildred hasn't gotten the level that she deserves. And so my challenge was always convincing my collectors that they needed to buy these artists, because I told them years ago, I said, look, you need to look at these artists in their 60s and 70s and 80s who haven't gotten the recognition they deserve, because they are our future old masters.
Yes, yes, thank you. So I gotta stop and ask you, what started you to collect African-American art? Yes.
My uncle gave this to me. My uncle George B. Murphy gave this to me when I was 11. No, I'm sorry, when I was about 15 years of age. And he told me that I had to collect. He told me that when I built a collection, I had to share it. He told me that I needed to be an artist. He told me that art is political, that if we didn't support artists, who would if we didn't support our artists? So he was a revolutionary, and he was a very good friend of Margaret Burroughs. The other person who influenced me to be an artist, I did this painting when I was 11 years old. And my mother would set up a studio in the dining room because she was a hobbyist and painted a lot. And one night she went to a PTA meeting and left this little unstretched, this little blank canvas on her easel. And there were 5 kids. So she glared at us, "Don't you dare go in my room and touch my oil. Don't you go in that room." And I, the most obedient of kids, that aroma of turpentine and oil paint, I went in there and I painted that little painting, and I left it on the easel, and I scurried up to bed because my mom had a terrible temper. And I came downstairs the next morning. I was just waiting for her. And she looked at me and she says, "You are an artist."
Oh, that is amazing. That's confirmation. Your mom told you, so you knew it was true.
Stopped telling me. She says, "Do not squander your gifts."
Now do not squander your gifts. I love it.
The painting on the right is by Ed Clark. And this is an interesting story because my husband purchased this painting, and my husband was not a collector, but Ed Clark was married to a relative and they had this friendship. And when Maurice was a resident, Ed said to him, "Man, you need to buy a painting for me because one day I'm going to be famous."
Yeah.
And Maurice bought the painting, and I must confess that over the years, it did find a place hidden under our king-size bed because I didn't like it. My taste was more toward realism, and then over the years I slid it out, and then I fell in love with it, and it's in a very special place in my home. And Maurice proved to be one of the smartest collectors in the family.
Isn't that something? So tell me, Madeline, we're talking about collecting and certainly the value. What advice do you give collectors who are just starting out?
I'm going to look at my crib sheet because okay, here we go. Look at a lot of art
Mhm.
Be disciplined, decide what you want to collect and what you do not want to collect. Always be open to the magic of an expected piece of art. But when you're young and looking, you need to go to art fairs.
Mhm.
You need to go to the Southside Community Arts Center, cultural centers,
Yes.
and particularly graduate exhibition shows at the School of the Art Institute or the schools in your neighborhood often are wonderful places to discover and to buy work. And my recommendation is to buy something that just makes your heart skip a beat.
Mhm.
And if you can't afford it, see if you can negotiate paying over time.
Mhm.
Because one of the worst, the story I hear all the time from every collector is it's always the piece that they said they couldn't afford and they settled for something that was okay. And
Yep.
that piece that they didn't buy haunts them for the rest of their life.
I have one of those stories myself because my babies were young and the piece was $1,500 and he said, I'll work with you. And I thought there's just not enough work with to make me, and that piece has haunted me for years. It has.
The other thing too is, and it's happened to me, you know, there are dealers and there are art gallerists and people who represent artists, and you need to be able to trust them because they're in the business of selling. And that's why that's why I became an art advisor, because I have no loyalty to any particular artist or gallery, and I have the universe from which I can choose
Mhm.
for my clients.
Mhm.
And so often if a collector works with one dealer or one gallery, they can only collect what the dealer represents. And so I think you have to diversify.
So Madeline, let me ask you this question. If there's a comment that pops up from time to time from collectors, and people will say, collect what you love. And then others say, well, collect with the thought that it may have value in the future. What are your thoughts on that?
ROI, return on investment. Well, you know, for years, my belief is that you buy with your head, you
Mhm.
buy with your heart, and you buy the best work that you can afford, but you do it in the context of being educated, looking at a
Mhm.
lot of art, and loving the work. And
Mhm.
if you select the best work by an artist
Mhm.
over the course of time, it's highly or potentially likely that the work may increase in value. And if you work with a smart art advisor who knows the art world and you listen to their advice, your work will have the possibility of significantly increasing in value. But it isn't a given.
Yes.
It isn't a given. And so you have to buy with the idea that, you know, when I'm ready to get rid of this, I may or may not be able to make money off of it. I might be able to get what I paid for it. But you've got to buy it because you absolutely can't live without it. That's my opinion. But then there are people who go about it methodically. I'm only buying X, Y, and Z because
Mhm.
it's worth this and it's going to increase the likelihood, blah, blah, blah. So each person uses his or her own strategy.
So has your strategy changed through the years?
Heck no. I followed my own advice and I learned, I have looked at hundreds and thousands of pieces of art in studios all over the country and abroad.
Mhm.
And, you know, I wish often that I had been smart enough to buy something every time I saw something, but I couldn't afford it. But then as I began to be more successful in my business, I began to budget a certain amount of money each year to buy an important piece.
Okay. So are there pitfalls to collecting?
yeah, much of what I said, buying from one dealer, or often a collector, a young collector will fall in love with an artist, and the artist is starving, and they will buy a lot of their work. And sometimes that's good, sometimes it's not. But I think you have to be discriminating, and you can't be a social worker and collect art.
Ah, okay. I understand that comment a lot.
Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about the beginning collectors. So what about that middle level, someone who has a collection? Do you ever filter out your collection? I know just personally, I started with one set of pieces, and my tastes are evolving and changing through the years.
Absolutely. It happens. It absolutely happens. And that's not a bad thing. And that's an opportunity to share it within your family, if your family is interested, or if you can sell it to someone who is beginning to collect, who has admired it in your home, and you say, well, I'm ready for it to have a new home. So that does happen. Your taste does change. And there's Jesse. Is Jesse out there?
Yes, he's out there. I shared with him that he would have a nice surprise coming through. So I got to just share this with you. I was coming to the event at Orange Moon, and I was on the phone because Jesse Howard did a solo show for us. And I told him I was going over and I was going to see you. And he said, Madeline Murphy. He just raved, high praise. And what he praised most was the level of support that you gave artists when they were starting out. And he just said, you helped so many artists with their careers. And that just warmed my heart, because we all need that person who believes in us and supports us, because the world, as you mentioned earlier, the world will say, oh, get you a real job. Why are you a musician? Why are you an artist? And they don't always understand.
I think what made me pretty good at my job was that I was in their shoes.
Yeah.
I had been in the studio. And then my great aunt, who was a very gifted portrait painter in the 40s and 30s, never got her recognition. And for almost 30 years, it has been my goal to make sure that happens. And I'm close to making certain that she's exhibited in a major exhibition in a couple of years. And I have also sold a piece of her work to the National Portrait Gallery. And I also lent a piece to the Indianapolis Museum of Art. So her name is Laura Wheeler Waring.
That is amazing. And I think about the number, stop here for a second. When I think about the number of artists that we have at the Southside Community Arts Center in our collection. And of course, there are the people who have made a name for themselves. Carrie James Marshall, who've come through the Fahim Majid, the Theaster Gate. So those people, Dr. Burroughs, who've come through there. And then I think about the number of artists that have been phenomenal, that didn't always get their just due. And so that is critical. And what would you recommend? And you mentioned your aunt, and you mentioned people like her who haven't gotten their just due. What do you think we can do to help move that process along?
Okay, I got an answer for you. And I've been
saying
this for years. The decisions are made at museums about who they collect. And so you need to know the curators, and you need to go to openings, and you need to advocate for inclusion of African-American arts and collections, but also you need to be on the boards of these. I advise, and one of the things that I told my wealthy collectors early on was that you have the power with your art to change the trajectory of African-American artists, because once you start building a major African-American art collection, at the cocktail parties that you go to with your white colleagues, conversations are always about what they acquired. And they're all on the boards of the symphony, the opera, and the art institutes. And I said, you will be invited to be on the boards of art museums when you begin to build important collections. And when you are on these boards, then you have the power to influence who they collect. And I can tell you of a handful of collectors with whom I've worked who are now on boards of major cultural institutions. And so I told him, and I said, and the committee you want to be on is the acquisitions committee.
Okay.
And you also want to be on the committee that discusses and chooses hires.
Okay.
So you've got to be on the inside. So that's one way.
That is amazing advice. So tell me a little bit about this artist, because I've got some good news coming about that artist as well.
Whitfield Lovell.
Yes.
And what slide is this? And his partner, Fred Wilson. We were at an event in New York, and this is a piece of his that I put in a collection. I put a lot of his work in collections, and the thing I love about his work is the scale. It's huge, and so I don't have a lot of collectors with ceilings tall enough. He does make some smaller pieces, but he can draw his butt off. And he uses charcoal and pencil on these found objects. And then he attaches elements. And so they're stories within stories. And he's such a modest human being. I was in his studio, and he's got walls and walls of silver pitchers and spoons and chairs and stuff that he attaches to his work.
So the good, exciting news for Chicagoans and everyone getting a little sneak preview, he will be at the Southside Community Arts Center, his work in July. So we are super excited, and certainly we'll be doing Eventbrite so that we maintain social distancing if we're still there. But I'm thrilled that his work will be coming to the Southside Community Arts Center. So the artist that we're showing now is Whitfield Lovell. Someone asked in the questions. So going to the next one. So tell me about this great picture.
On the left is Christopher, and on the right is Maurice. And I need to get rid of this phone.
That's okay, don't worry about it.
And I'm in the middle. And this has an interesting story. This is a life-size Polaroid photograph done by Dawood Bey, our own Chicago.
Okay.
And so I had finished my job with the city of Chicago, and I got a call from my guys in the public art program, and they had a budget to purchase a piece by Dawood Bey, but they didn't have enough money. And so they were soliciting people to see if they would give, I think, $1,000 to put in the pot so they could afford to have him commission a piece. And in exchange, you would get a portrait. And so I said, well, I don't know him. And, so we had lunch, and with the curator, I think it was, oh God, he was at the Renaissance Society. His name will come to me. Hamza Walker, who was at the Renaissance Society for years, and he's got a big job in Los Angeles now. So Hamza says, okay, we'll put you together. And I fell in love with Dawood. And so I said, okay, fine. And so he said, why don't you bring your sons? Why? I said, well, I thought we were getting, and I'd rather do my sons. He said, okay, fine. So Christopher and Maurice were home from college. Chris was at Yale, Maurice at Stanford. They were home for the summer. And the last thing that they wanted to hear was, guys, you're getting your portrait done. and you need to come with me and stand in front of a camera. And they're like,
Oh,
really? And so what do we have
yes.
to wear? I said, well, you got to look nice, but you don't have to be dressed up, but you got to be, shaved and get a haircut several days ahead, because I don't want to look like you're freshly shorn. So we go down. He was shooting at Columbia College because he was on the board. He was teaching there. I had actually influenced Columbia College to hire him. So anyway, wow. He says, well, you're coming too, right? I said, no, I was going to drop. No, I want you to come. So he did a portrait of the three of us.
So I got to make you laugh. Your son, Chris, said it's too big. And that makes me laugh because I have two boys and they are always the last thing when I have a great idea. This turned out wonderful. And I'm sure at the time we can probably, if you know sons and teens and college folks, they're like, what the heck, Mom? But they do it because we love them, right?
You know what? The thing about it was my husband never liked to have his picture made. And I had no idea that we were going to get this kind of a picture. And so over the years, everybody would come and say, where's Maurice? Where's Maurice? So I began in my practice to convince collectors. I got more than a dozen collectors to have these portraits done.
These are awesome.
Yeah.
Tell us about this great piece.
Oh, this is my Betty. This is the same person who was in my living room all those years ago. And I realized I don't own anything by Betty. And I said, I need to buy something. And so I was in LA and I went in her studio and I selected this piece. And it's done on an old slate that, you wrote on in school. And it's a picture of all these white children in school and one little Black girl. And it resonated for me because in the 50s, I was part of integrating Baltimore's public schools. And it was probably one of the hardest things I ever did in my life. So that piece I just adore that piece. And I adore Betty. And I went to her opening recently in New York. She had a major one-woman show at the MoMA. And so I followed her career. So we're great buddies.
Well, that piece is amazing. And I think many of us will recognize this artist as well. Yeah. Carrie James Marshall. I learned that he actually had his wedding, he and his wife, at the Southside Community Arts Center.
Oh my goodness.
The connectivity in Chicago and art. But tell us a little bit about this piece.
Well, I met Carrie James Marshall in 1991. And he had a studio down on South Michigan Avenue. And I had heard about him. And I just called him one day and said, I'd love to come to your studio. And so I went in and I fell in love with this piece, these little bunches on the side of her hair, Actually, it's a boy. And I bought it on layaway. And it was like about $1,200. And it's significantly increased.
I was gonna say, maybe just, a few multiples. Yeah, yes, that is amazing though. And you've had that piece on loan, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Well, I put it in an exhibit, his retrospective that opened at the Museum of Contemporary Art. It traveled all over, and then I lent it before that exhibit to a show in London. Yeah, so yes. And this is my art-filled home, and in the on the walls are paintings by my great aunt. The one on the left is a girl with a pomegranate. The one straight ahead is a girl on a chair. And then on the right next to the lamp, you can't see it very well, is the very first painting that I was given by my uncle. My Aunt Laura's husband gave me that painting. And
I love that idea, Madeline, that you just said, because so many of us have children, nieces and nephews, grandchildren, and to give them their first piece of art, and to start and begin to create people and young folks that love and appreciate art.
Well, you know, I believe that we have to be stewards and guardians of our artists' work, and also I'm following my uncle's advice, you know, to show it, to share it, to give it. And I have given art to my family, and I'm in the process of giving a lot of my work to my family. My grandson, who is a wonderful, wonderful artist and draws beautifully. Oh, somebody saying cousins too. Yes, cousins too.
It's a family gift.
It's a family thing. Yes, I just can't figure out how to do it. Because a lot of work is unframed, you know, and it's expensive to frame work, but is that my problem, right? Can I just give them unframed work?
I'm going to stay out of that family conversation, but.
Oh, yes, everybody says yes. Okay, fine.
Yes, I'm sure they're going to take a collective family vote and everybody will say yes. Tell us about this piece here. These pieces, I'm sorry.
The piece on the left is by Gordon Parks, and I got this years ago, and this is an iconic piece.
Yes.
And I acquired it many years ago, and I had the pleasure of meeting Gordon Parks. Actually, in the slideshow there was a picture of me with him at the Southside Community Arts Center, because that's where he got a lot of his work done. He
Yes.
worked at the Southside Community Arts Center.
He had a dark room in our basement. And we are looking to see long range planning. We're looking to see how we can honor that as well. And the pieces on the right?
That's Lorna Simpson, and it's and my grandchildren love this piece. Whenever they come in here and they say, Gaga, what is that about? And I said, that's for you to tell me. What do you think it's about?
I love it.
So she does a lot with gender and role switching and that type of thing. And I had seen this piece years and years ago, and I just loved it. And I didn't buy it. And then finally, maybe 10 years later, Rona Hoffman was representing her, and I bought it from Rona Hoffman. That's the other thing. There have been some dealers who have supported the work of African-American artists for a long time. And so I think we have to give them their creds. And also there are artists, there are dealers, African-American dealers who have been supporting African-American artists. And in our own city, Isabel Neal opened the first contemporary African-American art gallery, and it was on Superior Street. And when I started I did a project at City Front Place, which was my first corporate project. I bought a piece from her to show the people who were considering hiring me that, you know, here's a wonderful piece that you could, oh yeah, we'll buy that. And so Isabel and I did business over the years.
You know, it's interesting. It has been, someone just said Isabel Neal's gallery helped educate so many of us. This is the Stroger work that you did.
Yes. That was a project. And I have to give a shout out to Ronald Groves, who worked with me from the beginning of my business until he died a few years ago. And he did all of my installations. He bought a lot of the posters. He had years of experience working in corporate offices. And so he was my person. And why? He was in another, but this is in the next picture you'll see, oh, hey, Stephen. Stephen is in here. Stephen was among the artists in that picture who I hired to do a site-specific piece. It was like, I don't know, 25 feet long. I had to put art in the cafeteria, and oh my God. So Candida was teaching at the Art Institute, and Dawood was at Columbia, and both of them referred me to wonderful, wonderful artists. And this is a mural that's in the hospital. I commissioned that. And this is Candida's piece. And this is a painting of her grandfather who used a cane. He had one leg. And I had seen this piece in her storage locker because I was buying her art for clients before. And I said, you know, there's a piece that I want in the Stroger Hospital collection because this piece is so appropriate for the audience who are going to see it. And she had been holding it and said it needed to be in the right place. And she agreed to put it in the Stroger collection. And I really appreciated it.
That is a great piece. So we're running through some other photos. We actually had so many photos that are just amazing. Is this your home as well?
No, this is one of my collectors. That's a big Ed Clark on the right.
It's beautiful.
And then there is Carol Walker on the left. Yeah.
And the next one.
And this is a collector's home. This is Faith Rengold. It's a huge quilt.
It's beautiful. Her work is amazing.
And this was a fun party. Deb had just released a book. And she and her son, I hosted a soiree for them in my home to introduce her book and for book signing. And there's my buddy Dawood. Dawood and I often did receptions together in my home because there were opportunities at Columbia College.
Okay.
And
this man looks familiar. He's our co-president of the Southside Community Arts Field Grant,
and David Driscoll, and Naomi Beckwith, who has been a wonderful curator at the Museum of Contemporary Art, and she just took a big job in New York. She's leaving us.
Oh no, that is awesome.
And this is my girl, June Kelly. She's an institution. She has represented African-American artists for 30 years in New York City, and she is my go-to person. I trust her taste. She's been a confidant, a cheerleader, and just a wonderful resource. And Kelly Morgan, who is raising particular hell in the art world. She resigned and wrote a huge letter about the racism that she experienced at the Indianapolis Museum. And there are a lot of heads have rolled at that institution. And she asked me to lend a painting by my great aunt, Laura Wheeler Waring, to the Indianapolis Museum, which I did. But when Kelly left, I said, gotta take my painting, folks.
Gotta take it back. But it takes people with a voice to make change. And so your friend is the shero in New York, and you've been a shero to many of us here in Chicago. Who are these wonderful women?
Oh, these
with
are
you?
Divas, my divas. On the left is Leslie King, who is an artist and who worked for years at the my alma mater, the Maryland Institute College of Art. And she exposed me to so many artists because she had this fellowship geared toward African-American artists. And I used a lot of them in my projects. And in the middle is Lowry Sims, who was the director of the Studio Museum. She was one of the first curators at the Metropolitan Museum. She was at the Crafts Museum. She is a pioneer and just an extraordinary friend and mentor and just smart. These are some smart, fearless women.
Well, they are in good company with you. And this great picture, I noticed two of the women here, three.
Amanda Williams, Amina Dickerson, and Michelle Boone. Michelle was the commissioner of the Department of Cultural Affairs, and now she's with Navy Pier. Amina is doing wonderful independent consulting, And Amanda is just a bad sister. Amazing, amazing Chicago.
Absolutely. Chicago has no shortage. And who are these beautiful children?
This is my legacy. These are my grandchildren. And I have dragged them to museums, and I've told them they had to draw. And so this is at the Birmingham Project in Birmingham, Alabama. And then this is at the, when they visited the AfricanAmerican Museum of African-American Art and Culture in Washington, D.C. And I made them look at the list because I'm a donor, and I also teach them about the importance of philanthropy and supporting our cultural institutions and supporting artists. So this is my legacy.
So I got to tell you, I just remembered when I went to see the exhibit of Charles White.
Oh, yeah.
You brought your granddaughter. And I loved it because you were having her go through the pieces and you were talking about them, and she was just so engaged with you and the opportunity to spend some time with you and just learn. And I said to myself, I need to make sure that I do that with my babies.
Absolutely.
So I got to tell you, Madeline, you thought an hour. Are you kidding me? That's so long. And we are already in the Q&A and probably running out of time. So I want to make sure. I knew it was like Madeline said, well, I don't know, we don't have enough. It's like you have a life that's been so robust. So I want to ask a couple of questions from our audience. Seth Murphy says, when did you know you had to be an artist?
My father did not support me being an artist at all. He said, you can't make a living. And he asked me, how the hell are you going to make a living as an artist? And he insisted that I go to the University of Maryland and study business and public administration. So after nearly flunking out, my mother said, you just need to go to the Maryland Institute of Art. And that is an institution that saved my life.
Awesome. So we've got a jewelry designer, Cynthia Bowman, is on the question and answer. And she said, as a jewelry designer, do you consider your work and other jewelry design as art? Why or why not?
Well, when I design jewelry, I think about a woman's torso, and I think of that as a blank canvas, and that I'm creating something, a piece of art that's going to go on their body. So yes, I do. I see it as making art for the body.
So Laura Murphy said, how do you tell the difference between work by a hobbyist and work by a skilled and trained artist? And do you look into the training of the artist?
Absolutely. When I'm working with collectors or with artists, one of the criteria is that they have been making their art consistently for years, that they have a mastery of their craft, that they have some training, that they have some recognition from their peers, that they have some exhibition records. Yes, and so I'm very discriminating, and because I'm an artist, I have a strong aesthetic, and I have a very discerning eye, and I'm pretty tough.
So I want to piggyback on that question. When you go to an artist's gallery or look at their work and they ask you to critique it, will you? I know this is a tough one.
I'm telling you, listen, I often preface my response with, do you really want a critique? And as I've gotten older, I'm unfiltered. And so I really don't like to critique because I just can't BS, I really can't. But I'm not cruel, but I just don't play games. It's a serious career, and you got to have your chops.
That's come up with me being at the center, where that question has popped up in terms of, do we jury the work? Do we, how do we determine, should certain pieces be in the show or not? And so that's a tricky question.
Sometimes a good way to do this, and I did this often because I didn't know the universe of artists, and I used other artists whose work I respected as referrals and recommenders. And so sometimes a wonderful exhibit is an exhibit of artists who are recommending up and coming artists. And so they are discerning, and I think it's a wonderful way of doing it. Another way is to invite artists that whose work is good based on recommendations of others, as opposed to leaving it wide open. Sometimes you can't do that, sometimes you can't. And then there are other opportunities that artists need to be part of something that's a general invitation,
Yes. There was another question from an anonymous attendee, and that person said, did you interact with Dr. Burroughs when she was building the DuSable Museum?
Oh my goodness. I raised money for that museum. Yes, absolutely. And I got a lot of middle-class women to rally around that museum, many of whom were not familiar with Dr. Burroughs or had never felt welcomed by Dr. Burroughs. And I organized 2 extraordinarily successful auctions that raised a lot of money for the museum in the new facility. So absolutely, I was on the ground.
So I was just thinking back to the Chicago Printers Guild has done a phenomenal fundraiser for the Southside Community Arts Center, and that runs through the end of June. And I was thinking about your background in education and the fact that you are also a printmaker and Dr. Burroughs. So you have so much in common with her. So, okay, now that we're both on the screen, I gotta just ask, you didn't introduce us to the guy behind you.
My fine man who is looking over my shoulder. You know what? I bought that piece years ago, and there's something called a little disease that older people get. It's called CRS.
CRS, okay.
You know what? It begins with an S and ends with a T. I can't remember his name, and it's so embarrassing, but he's Cuban, and I just love this piece.
And someone said he's lovely. So
and then on the left over here is one of the first pieces I bought from the Southside Community Center.
Oh, wow.
And for years I attended it. I donated my art to it, so I developed a following of collectors through that. So yeah, that place resonates for me.
Well, we are super excited to hear that. And so I'll have conversation offline to talk about the 80th anniversary virtual gala that we'll be having, and some potential opportunities to share maybe more of your thoughts with us. So I'm asking the audience now, if you have any additional questions for Madeline, now is the time. Let's see. Your son says, have you ever been fooled?
By a fake?
I'm assuming, I don't know, but Maurice Rabb, have you ever been fooled? So I'm assuming that's what he's referring to.
Yeah, sometimes artists, I'll tell you, Margaret Burroughs used to reproduce her work. And there were times she did it so beautifully, you couldn't tell whether it was an original or a reproduction. And I did buy one. And then I bought a piece from someone who misrepresented it. Yeah, it happens.
It happens. Okay. And Andrea Wheeler said, would you share a bit on the work of Bisa? Is this an artist you're considering to help gain exposure?
I am not helping anybody right now, okay? I am working on my memoir.
Yes, well, I was going to get to that because.
But I had seen her, the promotion for it, and my granddaughter was was out of COVID prison. And a couple of Sundays ago, she was going to spend the weekend with me, and I didn't tell her. I just told her we're going to go to the Art Institute because there's a fabulous exhibit. And she's a wonderful artist. She draws every single day of her life, but she isn't always interested in going to museums. And so she went, and then I had two interlopers join me, her mother and father. It was supposed to be a Gaga day, but oh, I was blown away. I didn't know her work. I can't keep up with all these amazing artists. That's one reason I stopped doing my work, because I can't keep up. There's a plethora of wonderful artists. And
Your son said, "Thanks for including us, Mom."
Did I have a choice?
Stephen Godfrey said, "Have you worked with music and the performing arts as well?" And thank you, he said.
No, I haven't.
Our anonymous attendee has another question, and that is, do you collect works by artists from the African diaspora in other countries? And are there any contemporary artists that you would recommend keeping an eye on?
As I said, just look at African-American women artists who are establishing themselves, because I think that it's so important. They need the support. And you know, I told you I'm out of it, so I can't help you. I can't advise you. Talk to other collectors, talk to artists. Yeah. But there is work to be had, trust me.
There is work to be had, and certainly I'm going to do a shameless plug. The Southside Community Arts Center continues to bring in we've got another show coming up that should be starting in the end of April, April 30th, I believe is the date. And that will include, Sierra McKissick is the curator for that show, and that will include some works by within our collection, as well as some collectors' work. So that'll be an interesting take, so that you can, have an opportunity to look at what other people are collecting, and then look at our work. So we're super excited about that. And I've got a question that we all want to know. By Amy Murphy, how does Madeline stay so beautiful?
Because in my old age, I have become a competitive swimmer and an athlete.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
That is really
I competed in the National Senior Games. I have won medals in freestyle swimming, and I bike and I do crazy stuff. And I don't tell my kids all the stuff I do, because they say, they might say I need to stay home and eat bonbons.
So I'm looking at our time, and I'm asking, this is now, speak now or forever hold your peace. We've got Madeline Murphy Rabb. So you mentioned, so put it in the Q&A so we can make sure we get it. But Madeline, I know you and I talked a little bit before, and I want, what's next? Certainly besides competing in, swimming Olympics and everything else. I heard you say memoir. Tell us about that.
Well, for the past 2 years, I've been working on a memoir, and it's going to focus on my career as an artist, and really it's about proving to my father, who said, how the hell are you gonna make a living as an artist? And so it's pretty much about this kind of thing. And if anybody out there knows a publisher who might be interested, I'm looking for a publisher, and I hope to complete it within the year. So I'm moving ahead.
That is, I can't wait to get a copy, and I'm gonna just, hold you to, I won't mind signed, I'm just saying. I'm looking forward to, we'll figure out something, because we only were able to get a snapshot of your amazing career. And I honestly feel as though this was just a true honor to talk with you this evening, to hear more about your career, to hear about your work and the importance of bringing women artists to the forefront, as well as, making sure that the masters also include women.
Yeah. And the sad thing is, but the one thing, the shout out I want to give is to all the amazing young women who are curators, who are historians. I mean, we have a plethora of Black women who are just doing amazing work all across the country. And when I was looking for help, they weren't to be found, because the field wasn't that full.
So I have to give.
I have in my future is making sure that my great aunt gets the recognition she deserves. So stay posted.
Stay posted. Absolutely.
Healer wearing.
We got it. So Madeline, is there anything that you want to leave us with?
I'm exhausted. I've had so much fun. I don't think anybody wants to know anything more about me.
That's not true, because we're waiting. We're waiting on the bio. So to your point, I've got to give a shout out to my public engagement manager, Zakia Najiba Dumas O'Neill, who is also.
Listen. I am such a stickler and a control freak. And she was so open, and we collaborated on these slides, and she did a beautiful job. And thank you for being patient with me.
Thank the both of you for that conversation. I mean, that was amazing. I learned so much. I think a lot of us are just grateful to hear that. So
I also believe Kieran Hobson, I saw her name pop up. And you'll be excited to hear this, Madeline, as well, is that she is going to be October, November, December. She's going to be doing a women's show for us, women artists. And that will come to the Southside Community Arts Center in October. So stay tuned. I want to just tell you from the bottom of my heart how much I appreciated you joining us, and me, and talking and everything. And just the fun we had to get to this point in this evening. And so thank you, Madeline.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel honored. And I just have enjoyed this so much. And thanks to all the people who are spending their evening listening to this. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And the people who joined us tonight, I got to just tell you that we had more RSVPs for this talk with you than we've had. And so just to let people know, I think someone did ask the question. The recording will go up in approximately 2 weeks, because it takes us a minute with our shortage of team members. It takes a minute to get the logo and everything else done. But I hope that the people who joined us tonight had a great Friday. We say cheers to you. We appreciate your continued support of the Southside Community Arts Center. We ask that you follow us on social media. We launched a new website in February, so we're super excited about that. But we're now on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks to Zakia, we're now running across all of those platforms. But we just appreciate you being a part. And so we thank you and invite you and encourage you to continue to support and attend events with the Southside Community Arts Center.
And become a member of the Southside Community Arts Center. That's how we make a difference.
Yes, thank you, Madeline. Thank you. Zakia, did you have anything else for us?
No, I think that was amazing. But I did put a shameless plug into the chat for everyone to log on to our website and stay updated with us. And to echo Monique, please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. That's where we do a lot of our promoting and marketing for events.
You know what? Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
That was great. Thank you both. And I appreciate, everyone who attended tonight. This was amazing.
Thank you, Zakia. Madeline, you get the last say.
I'm just going to say thank you. It was a wonderful evening, and I feel very affirmed. So thank you for doing that. And thanks to everyone for their wonderful and generous comments. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we say good night. Please have a relaxing and amazing weekend. And we look forward to you joining us at our next event.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.